Deadly police shooting of an unarmed black man has led to protests and calls for accountability. 26-year-old Patrick Lyoya was killed after a traffic stop escalated in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And CBS's Adriana Diaz is there.
In Grand Rapids, there is frustration and anger over how a routine traffic stop
Do you have a license?
For what?
escalated into a deadly police shooting, claiming the life of 26-year-old Patrick Lyoya. Today, attorney Ben Crump, flanked by Lyoya's parents and a Congolese interpreter, called for accountability.
As his mother and father said, they believe their son was executed.
On Wednesday, police released several videos showing the entire confrontation. The officer first approaching the car.
No. Stop. Put your hands right. Stop.
Lyoya resists and runs. For 2 minutes,
Stop.
there's a struggle. The officer fires his taser twice, but misses. The officer's body camera goes off. It's unclear why. But other videos show that while on top of Lyoya, the officer takes out his gun and fires one shot to the head. The Lyoya family fled from the Democratic Republic of Congo for a safer life here.
The one who's supposed to be protecting Patrick's life is the one who has killed Patrick and take Patrick's life away.
Grand Rapids police say they will not identify the officer unless he's named as a suspect. City leaders are calling for calm until the Michigan State Police finish their investigation.
We will seek transparency. We will seek truth. Justice requires that this matter be handled fairly and efficiently.
The officer, who is a 7-year police veteran, is on paid leave during the investigation. In Michigan, officers can use deadly force if they fear death or bodily injury. Major, the police chief here, says they released all the videos to be transparent with the public.
Adriana Diaz, we thank you.
Hey, good evening. We want to welcome everybody to another episode of You in the Law podcast show. We're streaming live on Facebook Live. We're also streaming live on LinkedIn, and we're also streaming live on You in the Law YouTube channel. So if you haven't checked out our YouTube channel, definitely go into the search bar and just type in You in the Law podcast, and you will find our podcast on YouTube. Good afternoon, Chief Swag. How you doing?
What's going on, Verge? How you doing? To the listeners, man, I tell you, before I get started, man, I want to send out prayers to the family of our Officer Lauren Counts, who was killed in the line of duty yesterday in Detroit. And so send condolences to his family, to the Detroit Police Department, and to the city of Detroit.
Yeah, exactly, Keith. Another tragic death of an officer killed in the line of duty. Also, Keith, I want to, definitely remember your former administrative assistant, Kathy Lamarck, who lost her husband in Norman, Oklahoma. So our thoughts and prayers are with Kathy and her family as they deal with this difficult time of losing, her husband and kids losing a father. So she's definitely a lady that you spent a lot of time with, and I was able to get to know her a lot better through you.
Yeah, and her husband, retired Oklahoma City police officer. So
yeah, exactly.
To the Lamar family.
Yeah, exactly. So Keith, tonight we're going to be talking about, our topic is, get this pulled up here, police use of excessive force, something that, continues to be a topic around the country. The video that we just saw opening up the show was what took place in Michigan, and that officer now has since been charged with the death of that young man. And so tonight we're going to be, talking about, why do we continue to see officers use, force that results in the killing of mostly unarmed black men.
Yeah, I think the audience really needs to know before we even get started. We need to explain what excessive force is, and it's more force used than necessary to get a person under control. For those who aren't aware, there's a what's called a force continuum. And that force continuum is based on what amount of force that an officer can utilize to get a person under control. So the first part is officer presence and verbal direction. And that simply means an officer showing up, police car, uniform, and just talking to people. Sir, would you stand over here? Ma'am, would you stand over here? But just that officer presence calm things down. That's the lowest level of force. And then the next is touch control, when basically you touch someone and control the method or the location that you want them to go. And so you can't use touch control when someone is not doing anything but basically just saying, I'm not going to go anywhere. I mean, there's no actions. They're laughing at you. They're calling you names. You can't put your hands on someone just because of that. And then the third one is empty hand tactics or chemical agents, which is called OC spray. Some people know it as mace. And then the next is a taser or impact weapon. And then the most highest level of force is deadly force. You can never, so for instance, in a situation where someone is cursing you out and screaming and yelling, and there's no other actions but that, you can never just go straight to deadly force. You can never go to a level of force higher than what that person's actions are. So just wanted to get that out there to the citizens who are listening to the audience, because we'll talk about force continuum and wanted to ensure that everyone understands the levels of the force continuum. Now it's called reaction to resistance. So it's no longer called use of force, it's reaction to resistance.
Well, Keith, and I think a lot of, people will have a lot of questions during the podcast about those level of forces and why do we continue to see officers use deadly force in situations like what took place in Michigan, in situations like what took place in up in Minnesota, in Brooklyn Center, I believe, where Daunte Wright was killed, where the female police officer mistakenly, pulled out her weapon and she thought it was her taser. It was a simple traffic stop, I believe, related to an expired tag, and somebody may have even said he had an air freshener in the hanging from the window, and so how does the questions that have been asked of me, and I'm pretty sure of you as well, how does a traffic stop like that result in the death of an unarmed person, and why is it so much force used on a traffic stop? Just like the one in Michigan that we just saw the video of, Keith, where the young man took off running. There was a struggle. The police officer got on top of him, pulled a weapon out, shot him in the back of the head. There was no weapon found on him or a weapon found inside of the vehicle. So people have a lot of questions, Keith, and I think hopefully we'll be able to answer some of those questions throughout the podcast.
Well, definitely, a lower level of force should have been utilized, and that's why we have over the years tried to find out what resources can be utilized to prevent us from using the highest level of force that we recognize, and that's being deadly force. And so there are things that officer had at his disposal that I believe that could have prevented that tragic incident. it comes down to the point of the officer is always in control. Well, at the beginning, the officer's in control. And let me say this: we know that there are individuals out there that will fight, and that will be resistant. We know that. But one of the things we always look at, you and I being students of the profession, we always look, was there something else that officer could have done to minimize the chance of having to use deadly force? Could he have waited on his backup? That's a possibility. Could he have utilized his taser? I believe so. Could he have utilized other lower levels of force? I think that there were those opportunities. I think that there are those incidents where there are officers that believe that that's the only deadly force is the only response that they have to get the situation under control. But I'm telling you, let's look at the young man in Brooklyn Center. There was no need to utilize deadly force. That's an accident. But at the end of the day, we can't make those kind of mistakes. I don't believe that she set out to kill Dante. I don't believe that at all. I believe that it was a terrible accident, but we can't make those accidents. We know, we should know the difference between pulling out a taser or pulling out your gun. We train that. She was a field training officer. Exactly. So that type of deal cannot happen. It just can't happen.
Yeah, and I think oftentimes you hear something to justify that is the fact that officers are caught up in the moment. The adrenaline is going, and my response to that, Keith, is that this is a profession where you have to maintain your composure at all times. And it's almost as if we are, to some degree, making some excuses for when these things do happen. And we say, yes, everybody is human, but this is a profession where there is a lot of training put into the use of a taser, the use of a handgun. What is the difference? How they feel different? How they're placed on your duty belt. And so, and I'll just go back and use, if you go to the dentist, and if the dentist picks up the wrong tool and puts it in your mouth, you're going to feel it. And so you expect that dentist to know that they don't need to use this certain type of tool to do whatever they're doing inside of your mouth. And so they can sit there and say, hey, I apologize, I'm sorry, I just picked up the wrong one. But you're expecting that dentist or that dentist hygienist to know every single piece of tool that they're picking up is the right tool. So it's similar to what we're doing in law enforcement.
Well, you talk about, people, and I've said this before. We are human. We make mistakes, but we're at a point that when you get to when you're in the position that you may have to take someone's life, and I think the community realizes that in this profession, that is a possibility, that you may have to use an amount of force up to deadly force. People understand that, but also people expect in that situation, when you have that type of authority, people expect us to have common sense. They expect us to remain calm. That's part of the de-escalation tactics that we're supposed to be utilized, that we've talked so much about, as part of the 21st century policing, as part of right training, intelligence, emotional intelligence training. We can never get caught up in the moment. I think people understand exigent circumstances. They get it. There are those situations where you have to, at some point, you have to, pull your gun. There's going to be those times you pull your weapon, and God forbid you have to pull the trigger. But they expect you to be able to explain, be able to articulate. And as police chiefs, we have to articulate. They have to articulate why they went to that level of force. Because once you pull that trigger, there's no point of return. There's nothing more you can do. That is the defining moment once that bullet strikes someone. So,
exactly.
Yeah, it's a very, very serious and a very people say it's controversial. I don't think it's controversial at all. I think at the end of the day, we train to respond to the situation at hand. And when you look at the situation, the video that you just showed, I don't believe that led to the level. If that officer was on that gentleman's back, there were so many things, I think, other things that could have been done. And so I can see why he was indicted on those charges. I can easily see that.
Yeah. Well, hey, Keith, we got a comment from Nikki who states that it cannot be caught up in the moment, excuses because only white cops seem to fall prey to that on black citizens. This has to be a nationwide plan. She said it has to be. So we've got another comment from another listener, Chief Hill, who says, with limited funds for municipalities and state organizations, one of the first line they cut in the budget is training. It's a good comment, Jay. But I'll say this. This is just me speaking, and I'll let Chief Humphrey chime in. I think when we have all faced issues related to budgets being cut, especially when it's surrounding training, I think this is a time when small municipalities partner with other municipalities of their same size or larger, and where that training does not suffer, Keith. And I think when you do that, you can still keep the level of training that your organization needs, because I know there's agencies out there who are willing to help. And so for those smaller agencies who don't have the training budgets, I think that's upon the chiefs to really network with other departments and other chiefs to say, can we be a part of some of that training? And it would surprise me, Keith, if another police chief said, no, we can't do that.
Well, I get what Jay is saying. I mean, when budgets are cut, that's one of the first things. But at the same time, we have to know that there's mandatory requirements when it comes to continuing education and law enforcement. And so, when you start talking about, firearms, you start talking about firearms training, I think in law enforcement, we do train more regarding firearms training than we do, not all, but than we do in de-escalation tactics. Yeah. I think we do put a lot of emphasis in because, when we have, God forbid, us having to use deadly force, we can't make mistakes. We have to know where those rounds went. We have to know where our target is, what's the backdrop. We have to know so many things are going on really fast. But I do think that there are ways to get training, the type of training that we need. Sometimes people, and I've been in those situations where you fight to the end until you're just exhausted. But, the deadly force situation must and always needs to be the last resort in a force situation. It cannot be unless you drive up to a situation, someone is an active shooter situation. Man, you can't wait and go through all the steps. We get that. But, the situations when, you're on a traffic stop, somebody's got a warrant, they're sitting in their car, you can wait for your backup. Those are the things that, we've got to stop creating those situations to which we have to utilize force. For a fact, I was met with this same situation, several years ago. And when you look at the case that I'm talking about, what I'm talking about, Virgil.
Yeah.
I had an officer put put himself right in the line in the trajectory of a vehicle, and then say that he felt his life was in danger. Well, when you put yourself in that position, yeah, I mean, so many things that could have been done differently, but that was a situation where it didn't have to end that way. It could have ended differently. Could have ended more, in a better way. I think both people could have walked away.
Keith, and I always say this. I think everybody gets caught up in the moment, and in that moment is no matter what, you're going to jail, and if you don't go to jail and it results in your death, then you are the sole reason behind what has happened to you. And I think that is how some police officers feel, is that, hey, if the police tell you to do something, then be a law-abiding citizen and follow the commands of the officer. It won't result in you being seriously injured or you end up losing your life. And so I think when you put yourself in those situations, Keith, I think you have to deal with the consequences based upon what has happened. And I'm going to ask this question to you, Keith, and I think this is something that is not often talked about. Do you think policies are put in place that, I'm going to say, enable officers to use excessive use of force? Because policies are written in such language that a citizen who has some intelligence about the law will probably read that and say, you're giving these guys a lot of flexibility because based on the policy.
Well, in law enforcement, you want to be able to give officers need that discretion. You don't want every situation to be a letter of the law incident. You don't. So there needs to be discretion, and so you can't write policies so stringent that officers feel that they can't make a decision that's best for the incident. Do I believe there's officers that interpret policy to their benefit? Absolutely. Do I believe that there are those policies that are so confusing that people may not be able to clearly understand it? Absolutely. And so I think that it's, it's you've got to have the policies and you've got to train more on, and I think departments are getting to that, the more on the de-escalation and the verbal judo. We used to call it verbal judo, de-escalation and emotional intelligence. I think more and more departments are doing that. But sometimes, Virgil, it just comes down to that individual officer. I mean, you can have some of the best policies. You can be an accredited department. You can train. But I think it just comes down sometimes to that officer and their mindset. And they panic. And then it comes down to a point of, this is the only way I feel I can handle this when there are, because this, and to the listeners out there, they pay us to make good decisions. Yeah. And so,
not bad decisions.
Yeah, they don't pay us to make those decisions. And Virgil, let me say, you said something earlier, and I just want to speak on that. You talked about people not complying with law enforcement, with officers. And I've always said the side of the road is not the place to have court. I've always said that.
Exactly.
But you got to realize too, there are those individuals that are frightened to death of the police. I mean, there are those individuals that when they see a police officer, they run. There are those individuals, they have a misdemeanor warrant, they run. But then there are those individuals that are just going to fight you. They're going to fight you, and in their minds, it's me or you. And I'm not going to jail. I'm going to do what I need to do to stay out of jail. we've got to learn how to deal with each one of those situations on a day and recognize those situations quicker than we do. But I'm not, I think unless you are being actively aggressive toward an officer, we've got to realize sometimes you just got to let people run. When I've seen, officers feel like it comes with pursuits too. And I think sometimes there's just those things you have to do when somebody drives off. Is it worth pursuing them? If somebody tells you they're not going to sign a ticket, does that justify you putting your hands on them, pulling them out of the car, and take the probability of having to use force? I think we have a bigger responsibility to ensure that we handle the situation and meet the situation, and realize that we can't use any force above what it takes to control the situation at hand.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the situation in Akron. That's going to be very interesting because you have a gentleman that was firing at the officers to get out of the car. In their mind, they probably thought that he still had a weapon. They didn't, I'm gonna believe that they still believe he had a weapon because he had just fired at them. He's turning around with his hands in his waistband. They felt that they needed to utilize deadly force. The question is going to be is why so many shots?
60 or 70 plus rounds.
Yeah, and they said he was hit that many times, but there may have been as many as
even more.
Yeah. So I think that's going to be the question. I think that people understand the officer's response regarding this gentleman who had just shot at them. They couldn't see his hands. They knew it. They knew he had a weapon because he had shot at them. But the concern is, what about why that many times? Was anybody else hurt? Was there a possibility of other people being struck? So I think that's what we're talking about. And they talk, is that excessive force? Because, does it take all six or how many officers? And that's a debatable topic that man, you're going to have so many different answers. But, at the end of the day, I think the only thing that can be questioned on that situation is why so many shots?
Yeah, exactly. Hey, Keith, I want to remind everybody you're watching, and you'll be listening to You and the Law podcast show, streaming live on Facebook Live. And tonight we're talking about police excessive use of force. And Keith, we got a comment from Nikki who says she loves us, and consequences should arise from failure to submit. But please explain why white defendant suspects make it to jail alive, yet black suspects wind up with bullets in their back while handcuffed. Please stay. She says, please stay right there and explain.
Virgil, I don't know if you can explain that. We've talked about that. That's probably been one of the most difficult questions to answer.
Yeah.
I do know that there are white suspects that are shot by police. I do know there are white suspects that are killed by police.
Not at the alarming number that blacks are.
Right. Well, let me just say this. I do know that occurs.
Yeah.
We all know that occurs. I think what makes it look so the way it does is because the media portrays it. But I can't explain why you have the situation, Dante Wright, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. I don't know why. I can't explain it, and it does look bad, and it's very difficult to understand. Very difficult to explain, because there are people that want to know why the person in Highland Park, Illinois, why
just getting ready to bring that up.
Yeah, why was he not shot?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. You know, there are going to be arguments that he complied. You know, he had his hands up. You know, and that's what you want to be able to see a person's hands.
Yeah.
Do you just shoot someone just because? Yeah, you're upset, you're frustrated, you're angry, but do you shoot someone where you can see their hands? And I think that's what a lot of people are. They get confused about. You know, this man just killed 7 people. He gets out of a car, they don't do anything. But you got other person that has no weapons, complying, and then they're shot. So it's very difficult. I can't explain that. I can't explain it.
Well, Keith, you know, and Nikki, want to definitely thank you for your comments. You know, again, it's a question that deserves, you know, an answer, but sometimes, you know, you don't know why those things happen. And but Keith, I want to go back to an incident that took place, I believe, in Chicago, where some officers were going into the main precinct of the police department, and a car drove past them, and the officer stated that the driver of that car shot at him. So they turned. That officer proceeded to chase that vehicle. The driver didn't pull over. There was a very long pursuit, and eventually it ended where I don't know how many officers ended up shooting into the side of his vehicle. Well, probably over 60 or 70 times of what took place in Akron. Come to find out, Keith, after this investigation, and they went back and listened and watched the video footage from the police department cameras outside, the car that passed backfired. And that officer said that that person shot at them. So every officer in that city was under the impression that the car that they were pursuing, that person inside of the car just shot at a police officer, tried to kill a police officer. And this was I don't know if you remember this, Keith, but one of the police officers actually jumped on the hood of the car and started shooting into the windshield while other officers were still firing from other angles into the car. And so you're going to have some people who will probably question the situation in Akron, because there is a surveillance camera that shows them driving down the interstate where they said that this person was shooting at them. So you're going to have some people even question the fact that these officers really believe that that person shot at them, even though they did find a gun in the car. But I go back to that situation that took place in this other city where the car backfired, and the family even later said that that the driver, that just happened all the time. It was some kind of mechanical issue with the car.
Well, what you're leaving a part out, and the other part of that is the officer that initiated the call later said that he realized that it was a problem with the car, but he never got on the radio to clear up what he had initially said. So that was a part, and I got that from a very, very reliable source who was very instrumental in that, very active in that case. So that's.
And I think Keith, people even question, none of those officers were charged in that situation.
I think you're right. There were quite a few that were fired or resigned, but I do not believe there were anyone. You're right. I don't think anyone faced any kind of.
And again, it just goes back to people in our community, in the Black community, continue to question law enforcement because there is this perception that whatever the police say is right, is gospel, and you're going to, the courts are going to take their word, the DA is going to take their word, they're going to be protected by the unions, And so this is why so many people in the Black community feel like their voice they really don't have a voice. And to some degree, Keith, the voice of these families have been Attorney Ben Crump. Here's a man who has actively pursued and also made sure that agencies changes their policies. So when these things do happen, they don't happen again. But you've got a lot of people who really, that's why they don't trust the police, because of those things that they continue to hear.
Well, going back to Nikki's point, I mean, how do you tell the Black community that the Black men don't have a target on their back when they continue to see these kind of things occur? So my question to you, Virgil, and to the listeners, please chime in. Are we that, or as a race, are we that threatening to the point that it appears that when we're countered by police, are we that big of a threat? Do we pose that big of a threat to the point?
It's a good question.
Where there's a heightened sense of reaction.
Yeah.
And let me back up. I'm not talking about the exigent circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about those situations. I'm not talking about Uvalde. I'm not talking about a situation like Lowe. And God bless the souls of each and every one of those individuals, those babies, and those individuals that were in the families. I'm not talking about the situation that happened I'm talking about the situation on basic traffic stop ends up being going to the point that someone is dead. Do we pose that big a threat to our society that we're so feared that automatically a person has in his mind that I'm gonna have to kill this individual? And have we gotten to the point where organizations that represent the officers will always justify the actions of those officers, especially when it comes to a situation where it involves an excessive amount of force involving people who look like you and I? That's the question that I have related to excessive force. Why is it there's always an excuse, always a defense, even though when it's everybody sees what it is what it is? Do we pose that big a threat to the community, to society?
Yeah, that's a good question, Keith. Hey, Keith, and to the listeners, getting ready to play another video of an incident that took place, I want to say in Baltimore, where it goes back to the use of excessive force. So, Keith, I don't know if you've seen this video because it was just recently in the news, but we're going to watch this video courtesy of CBS News.
Outrage over an incident in a police van in New Haven, Connecticut that left a man paralyzed and 5 officers on paid leave. There is video, and we have to warn you, it is very tough to watch. Randy Cox is a criminal suspect in handcuffs. He was incapacitated when police dragged him from the back of a transport van. Now, police did not use his seatbelt on Mr. Cox, so he was severely injured when the officer driving made a very sudden stop. National correspondent Jerika Duncan is tracking this investigation, and again, this video is disturbing.
Just hold up, okay? All right, what's up?
Randy Cox was at a block party when New Haven police arrived in response to a weapons complaint. Officers arrested Cox, who they say is an ex-felon and was carrying a firearm illegally. As they were transporting him to jail, authorities say Officer Oscar Diaz was speeding and came to a sudden stop to avoid an accident. As a result, Cox's head is slammed against the back of the van, which had no seatbelt.
I can't hear you.
Despite Cox's repeated calls for help, it took the officer almost 4 minutes to check on him.
Can you move at all? I can't move.
Before calling an ambulance to meet him at the police station. When the van arrived, several other officers were waiting and began berating Cox to get out.
Move your leg. Sit up.
Why y'all listening, bro?
Sit up.
I can't move.
You're not even trying.
About 3 minutes later, they dragged Cox, feet first, out of the van.
What's going on? Huh?
You ain't cracking. You just drink too much.
Before officers forcefully hoisted him into a wheelchair.
Sit up.
Cox is processed and dragged into a holding cell about 10 minutes after the van arrived at the station.
He's perfectly fine. You want to put these on? Yeah.
He was placed on the floor where an officer shackled his legs, but he couldn't move as he was paralyzed from the chest down.
Mr. Cox was mistreated. He should have received medical attention immediately. We can't defend anything that was released.
Now, the 5 officers involved are on paid leave pending an investigation. This morning, Cox remains hospitalized in intensive care. Attorney Ben Crump is representing Cox's family as they pursue damages against the city.
We want criminal accountability for those officers, but we also want to see policy changes.
Cox's sister, LaToya Boomer, says she just couldn't finish watching the footage of how officers treated her brother.
It made me sick to my stomach. To treat somebody like that, at what point in time do you believe someone that's saying, I think my neck is broke?
Oh. Well, the mayor's office announced several policy changes following the incident, including installing seat belts in all police department transport vans and requiring officers to buckle in detainees. Seat belts were already required in police cruisers. Now, Crump said the family will seek a civil settlement from the city to cover Cox's medical care and lifelong injuries. Obviously, these police officers have a tough job, but it's always humanity first.
Yeah,
right. Humanity first.
We saw none of that there. Especially when you see him standing as he's getting in the van and he's fine standing. He's fine. And the way that they spoke to him, that's the thing that's also very heartbreaking to see, the way they spoke to him. Get up.
You're perfectly fine.
You're perfectly
Drank
fine.
too much.
When you see that he hit his head the way that he did.
I know.
The humanity.
Yeah.
I was thinking that throughout the entire story. Where's the humanity? Yes, perhaps there was a crime, but you have to treat even those who break the law with humanity.
Yeah. And after Freddie Gray, I'm surprised that this is even an issue, that you put somebody in a van like that and not buckle them in.
Yeah.
Still
Definitely
some
tough
things
to
we
watch.
need to fix there. Rika, thank you.
Thank you, Tree.
You know, Keith, I tell you, I think that's probably one of the most disturbing videos I've seen recently on so many levels. And I'm going to say that, the reporter said, yeah, police officers have a tough job. Yeah, we do. But that situation right there wasn't anything tough about what took place with that young man. And what's even more disturbing, Keith, is the fact that you have got every single race, whether they're black officers, Latino officers, white officers, every single race was a part of what took place with that individual. And it is really disturbing to see black men, black women ignore a person who has some serious injuries. I think at the end of the day, Keith, it shouldn't be about your race, but I don't know. I'm just lost for words, Keith, because it is real disturbing to watch that. And the fact that this man is going to be paralyzed most likely for the rest of his life. And the same thing if we go back to 2015 with Freddie Gray. Keith.
Let me say something. I wanna just, I think this is gonna all blend in. Nikki asked, she said, Chief, your questions, are we that threatening? Do we pose that big of a threat? Respectfully, I just want to know, are you serious about these questions? And I think Nikki's misunderstanding what I'm saying. What I was asking is, do we pose that big of a threat to society that we are dehumanized to the point of, look at what happened to this gentleman, you know, he's telling them, I'm hurt. And to the point of he's not hurt. And they're dragging him. And it comes down to, and you've seen this happen. Oh, he's just playing, she's just playing, they just don't want to go to jail. Well, we're not doctors. If somebody's telling you that they're hurt, if somebody's telling you that they're injured, we have an obligation to get them to see medical. And so that's what I was asking, Nikki. Do we pose that big a threat that we're dehumanized? Is it because we look the way we do? Is it because we talk the way we talk? Is it because we think the way we think? Is it because we live in the neighborhoods that we live in? Does that give people the right to treat us the way that it appears that we're being treated when dealing with police? That's what I was asking.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we are a threat. I'm asking, do we appear that we're that big a threat?
Yeah.
To the point of a man's head is slammed against the door, to the point it broke his neck. He's paralyzed. And
he's paralyzed. Yeah. And the fact, Keith, that there were seat belts that was in that van, because you can see the pictures of the seat belts. They just didn't take the time to follow their policy and follow their procedures. So he wasn't being combative, Virgil. He was not. At no point was he.
Yeah, to the point of where they can say, well, we fear for our safety, and that's why we didn't seatbelt him. It didn't appear that he was basically saying, he was disagreeing that he should be arrested, but I didn't see anything where he was physically resisting.
Yeah.
And then, did that officer actually have a reason to stop in the manner that he did? Did he think that was necessary? Did he think that was funny? We may never know. But at the end of the day, you've got a gentleman who's paralyzed and whose families are going to be responsible for taking care of him. And it just comes to the point of that is dehumanizing. That's a form of dehumanizing someone. And you don't value that person because that person had a felony conviction and he had a gun. But do you value that person any less than you devalue that person and not devalue somebody who may be driving a Mercedes? I don't know. I think it comes down to the fact of, there was no reason to react that way. We react to the actions of individuals. That's what we're supposed to. There was no reason, there was no action, no reaction. There was no actions that met that type of reaction from law enforcement.
No. And all of this started behind the fact that they said he was in possession of a weapon and he was a convicted felon. And somebody that's in a possession of a weapon who's a convicted felon who didn't resist arrest, who didn't put up a fight, didn't do any of that. He was handcuffed. He was put in the back of his transport van, and you saw what happened. And so just very disturbing video. And so hopefully, Nikki, you're still watching, listening, that Chief Humphrey answered that question. Keith, I got another video that I want to play because we're going to be coming up on the last few minutes of the show. And it just goes again with, here's another way police officers use force. And it's something that it has cost this agency in the state of Arkansas some money.
News across America tonight. Video shows a terrifying scene at an attempted traffic stop in Arkansas. You can see a state trooper deliberately bumping a woman's car, causing it to hit the median and then flip over. That woman was pregnant at the time. The officer said he performed the maneuver because the driver was speeding and did not pull over. CBS News correspondent Jerika Duncan reports on the video that is now evidence in a lawsuit.
Janice Harper was on her way home from the movies last July when Arkansas State Trooper Rodney Dunn tried to pull her over for speeding. Video from Dunn's dash cam shows within seconds of turning on his overhead lights, Harper moves into the right lane, slows down and turns on her hazards while continuing to drive. About 2 minutes later, Dunn hits Harper's car. The maneuver caused the SUV to spin on the highway, hit the inside wall, and flip.
It rolled over. Give me EMS.
Dunn calls for EMS before pulling over and talking to Harper while helping her out of the car.
Are you the only one in the vehicle?
Yes.
Okay. Well, ma'am, you've got to pull over when we stop. It doesn't matter, ma'am.
Thought it would be safer to wait until the exit.
No, ma'am. You should pull over when law enforcement stops you, okay?
But an Arkansas state driver's license guide says when being stopped by law enforcement, you should activate your turn signal or emergency flashers to indicate to the officer that you are seeking a safe place to stop. A new lawsuit from Harper claims there were no exits or a shoulder for Harper to safely exit the highway.
We call it a pit maneuver when people flee from us or don't stop from us.
Court documents allege Dunn executed a negligently performed pit maneuver or pursuit intervention technique, which put her life and the life of her unborn child at risk. Harper told Little Rock station KLRT she thought she was going to lose her baby.
What if I had kids in the car? I mean, he wouldn't have known. Did that matter? What was going through his head? What made him think this was okay?
Thankfully, Janice Harper's baby is okay and is now 4 months old. We don't know the full extent of the injuries, but the Harper's attorney said they have heard from several other people saying similar things have happened to them. We've asked the state police for comment and have not heard back. Jerika Duncan, CBS News, New York.
You know, Keith, and I think, that's another situation where an officer went too far. And, the lady asked a question, what if she did have kids in the car? And those kids could have been ejected, even if they had been in a child car seat or even in a car seat or any other passenger. Could have been ejected, all because that this was related to a speeding violation. She was speeding on the interstate, and it resulted in this officer, using this pit maneuver. And Keith, one of the things that came out of that, lawsuit, the Arkansas State Police ended up changing their policy surrounding that, and that's what this lady wanted, and that's what her attorney wanted. But Keith, at what point, when you listen to this officer say, well, ma'am, we do that because people are fleeing from us, I just don't think that's acceptable.
You're absolutely right. And I think Nikki's dug down and
Nikki's got something else.
She says, my question is simply not appropriate. It suggests that if blacks didn't speak a certain way or weren't too dark or too light, blacks would not be victims. That's not what I said. I was stating a point. Does this create police to treat us differently? That's what I'm saying. I don't know however other way I can ask that. I'm not going to try to clarify it any other way. I don't think anyone else out here took it that way. I think they understand what I was trying to say. The question is because of the way I look, because I'm a large guy, does that make me a threat? Does that make me more of a target? And it shouldn't. And so that's all I'm going to say about that, because I'm not going to get into this debate regarding what I said. I think everybody else out there understood what I was saying.
Yeah.
But, we have tools, Virgil, we have in our toolbox. And we don't know what to do with those tools. The pit maneuver is a tool. The pit maneuver is not an everyday tool. It goes back to what we talked about. It's based on exigent circumstances when you can articulate why you felt this person was putting other people in danger. It is not a maneuver that you just use on a daily basis. And so my thing was, to say that you thought she was fleeing. Well, how do you not know the law? The law is very clear that she was following the law. And so why do you You know, if she's doing what she's supposed to do, then why is it right for you to be able to take it to that measure? She's following what the driver's state law says about if you are, if you're being stopped by police. We tell people that. People do it all the time. You know, pull over in a lighted parking lot. I mean, with everything going on in the nation, people are doing that. You know, they're continually driving, calling 911. You know, somebody's following me. I don't know if it's really a police officer, or I'm going to pull over to. And we even tell people pull over in a lighted parking lot. So the things that we tell people to do, they still fall victim and end up being injured or worse, following what we said. We tell people to do. You know, at the end of the day, the articulation, there was no way he could articulate what he did.
Well, there's no way he could justify it. Yeah.
Well, you know, it's like I said. You know what that's like. You know, I talked about having a toolbox. Man, it's like, you know, you go and you buy this 200-piece tool set, and you need to put a nail. You're trying to put a nail in a piece of wood, but you grab the wrong tool. You grab a crescent wrench. I mean, those are the things that, you know, we have these tools, and sometimes people don't know how to utilize them, or they overutilize them, but just because we have them. And so, you know, those are the things that concern me. Those are the things that concern me.
Yeah.
The fact that we have these tools. Are we getting trained in these tools properly? Are we giving officers too much freedom to do certain things?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Exactly. Well, Keith, and you know, the situation that took place in outside of Little Rock, Little Rock has had multiple state troopers involved in these pursuits where they've used those pit maneuvers, and there was another situation where a lady and several other people were in the Jonesboro, Arkansas area, and they were at a Dollar General store. They said it was a robbery, but it turned out to be a shoplifting deal. A pursuit took place. The state trooper used a pit maneuver as the vehicle was traveling 102 miles an hour, and the lady ended up losing her life. But there was a lot of questions surrounding how that took place, and this incident right outside of Little Rock, where the officer was found to be in violation of policy as a result of this lawsuit, but nothing, other than that took place with him. But so hopefully everybody who tuned into the show, Keith, came away with a better sense of how the use of force has been so excessive, whether it be related to a lady driving down the interstate, speeding, whether it be a person who flees from the police and there's excessive use of force that takes place, because these things will not stop. They will continue to happen, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're absolutely right. It is, and I wish I had a magic potion to stop it. This is a very difficult job to do. It is very difficult. We are trained to multitask, but we do, at any split second, we do, our lives can change forever, and the life of others can change forever. And so we do have to get it right. We cannot abuse our authority. We cannot abuse or try to justify our actions just based on the fact that we carry a gun. We wear a badge. So, and good topic. Good topic.
Yeah. Well, hey, we got one last comment from Nikki. She said, "I do understand your position, and I do understand you're trying to figure out what and why the perpetrators obviously feel threatened, I'm suggesting we look at the reverse. What's wrong with the very brains of other predators versus how we, and I can't read the other part of it, but Keith, it's been another great podcast show, and hopefully this has been very informative to the listeners. And we definitely thank everybody for tuning in and watching us. And if you miss any parts of this show, you can definitely check us out on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and many other platforms. And you can also check us out on our YouTube channel and for many other great podcast shows. And Nikki's Chief Humphrey, she says, excellent. She says,
I love Nikki. Hey, hey, look here.
Yeah, well, and I'll tell you this, Keith. Nikki is one. When I had on Bob Scales, she asked a lot of tough questions to Bob Scales, and it was good. And I think that's why so many people tune into our podcast, because we don't get defensive about it. It's good to have that positive dialogue with our listeners. And Nikki, we continue to thank you and so many others who tune in every Thursday to listen to me and my good friend talk about things that we know is important to.
Did I tell you I was your friend? Did I tell you I was your friend?
Well, you know what, man? Hey, I got to, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to have to pick you up from an airport. So, you're going to sit in the front seat, not the back seat.
Hey, man, listen, did I give you permission to tell people we're friends?
Well, you know what? You didn't give me permission, but I just let the world know. I let the world know that you are.
Started from the mountaintop. I appreciate it, man. I'm honored to be your friend, man.
All right, brother. Well, hey, it's been a good show. And until next Thursday, until we meet again for another episode of You and the Law Podcast, we will see you next Thursday, everybody.
All right, man. Love you, bro.
All right, have a good night. Thank you.
All right.